6:29, morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie.
Right, let's have a look at today's front pages for you now. And the NHS pay deal signals the end to a wave of public sector strikes as unions accept the government's 5% offer. That's according to the Eye.
The Express talks about the latest deal and says it is victory for common sense and patience.
Carry on, nurse. That's the front of the Sun this morning as NHS staff halt their strike action for the hopeful foreseeable future.
The Times is praising what they're calling a new fair pay rise for NHS staff after talks between the unions and government came to a positive close.
The Mirror also covering the NHS breakthrough, but adds that now is the time to help other key workers come to an agreement over their own strike actions.
The Telegraph has Labour's plans to axe the recent abolition of the lifetime contributions cap if they come to power. It's all to do with your pension, of course, adding the decision could leave pensions raided and could throw the financial industry into turmoil.
The Guardian is talking about the Met Police's culture of sexism and racism as the latest report highlights the lack of change within the force.
And it's beyond a parody, according to the Mail, as Oxfam release a 92-page inclusivity guide calling English the language of a colonial nation and suggests that people avoid words like headquarters and mother.
And finally, The Star is talking about a generation of sleepers after a recent poll suggested that 18 to 24-year-olds are out napping over 65.
Oh, I love a good snooze.
Yeah, well, we're very good at it for our jobs, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
I've got a lovely 4-hour nap in the diary this afternoon.
Oh, yes, me too.
That's not nap anymore, is it? Half asleep.
Yes.
Anyway.
Let's go through the papers this morning with the legendary broadcaster, Miss Elizabeth Kershaw.
Oh, Margarita Mary.
You're
please.
Elizabeth as well.
Yeah, I'm Mary as well, because Catholic Irish. You've got to be called Mary.
Thrown all in there.
St. Patrick's Day.
Happy St.
She's
Patrick's
completely out-Irished me today.
She has, yeah.
Liz should have been in her green, but did you remember it was St. Patrick's Day?
All week I've been thinking I must wear my green dress on Friday, and then, you know, you get up in the dark at 3 o'clock,
Dressed in the dark,
and I just
yeah.
You thought it was green.
I didn't know.
Well, you look great, Liz. It's great to have you with us as well.
Let's talk about the Express this morning. They're calling this deal with NHS England a victory for common sense and patience.
They've also said it's a victory for the Daily Express.
Well, yes.
Which has called for ministers all along to agree a sensible compromise with nurses, so they're claiming it. I think it is a compromise because the Royal College of Nursing was asking for 19%. Now, this 5% applies to not just medical staff, nurses, paramedics, but also cleaners and porters. So it's across the board 5% rise and a one-off bonus of at least £1,655. What do you accept? If you've been going on strike for 19% and somebody said, we'll give you 5%, would you go, oh, all right then?
Yeah, but it's whether you believe what the unions were saying, because there's no way they were going to get 19%.
No, well, the Royal College of Nursing and it's one of 5 unions who are now recommending to their members that they accept this. And last night, can you imagine if you're doing a late shift on a quiet hospital ward in South London, St George's, in sweeps, Rishi Sunak to press flesh with the nurses and tell them he hopes they'll accept it. I think it's good that they're getting a pay rise. 1 minute, though, we couldn't afford it, and it was absolutely non-negotiable. And now we can afford 5%, which is well short of what they wanted.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much that would actually be in your pocket.
Plus it's on the so for some of the lowest pay. The 6% that they're getting for this year and their one-off payment is £1,655, so the 5% is £1,300 and something, and then up from there. So,
shall I tell you what I think?
No.
When I was okay, I'll get my quote. When I was watching the budget, I thought I'll have to watch this in full because I can't comment on it if I'm required to on Friday if I've just watched sound bites. So I watched the whole thing. God. Anyway, I watched it and I thought, this is all well and good, you know, help with childcare and everything else, and giving people packages, which we'll come on to, I'm sure, this morning, to get them back to work. And it's now alleged that for each person that the Chancellor gets back into the workforce, it will cost us £70,000 in, you know, incentives and
lost tax revenue and all that sort of
Well, just, you know, things like childcare and extra allowance on pensions and all the rest. It's £70,000 per person. And when I was watching the budget, I was thinking to myself, the emphasis in this is, as usual, seemed to me to be wrong, because as usual, it's helping the people who aren't economically active, and I know we have to help people who can't help themselves, but there's not enough in this to help people who are like two people, a couple with kids, going out day in, day out, working long hours, low-paid jobs. Those people are the ones that are just above the threshold for getting any support financially, and then the people who are getting slightly more money in salaries, professional people, they're not getting the same help with childcare. In fact, if they get a slight pay rise, they're going to lose out altogether with any perks with child. It just seems, for a Conservative government, that if you do go out and work your butt off, you're the last person to be rewarded.
Well, of course, the Labour Party would say the opposite. The Times is looking at the lifetime allowance on pension savings, so you can save as much as you want in your pension, and also the amount you can put in every year for the tax benefits goes up from 40,000 to 60,000. Which, I mean, some would say, well, that's a benefit to a lot of people. Labour's saying they're going to reverse that if they get into power, because actually it's just helping the better off.
Yeah, well, there's a reason, isn't there? A very cynical reason for this, and it did get mentioned in brief. I was thinking, when's he going to mention hospital consultants, for example, GPs? The reason that so many really qualified medical people have been retiring earlier is because there was just such a disincentive for them to carry on, because they couldn't put any more into their pension, and they got taxed, for everything.
There's an argument to say this could have been tailored to them specifically.
Well, he didn't mention them at first, and then he mentioned them in passing. But when I was watching it, I thought, this is for the NHS doctors and higher paid nursing managers, and so he gave it to everybody. But Labour obviously didn't know how to respond to this immediately, and then apparently they got together after in a cabal to discuss how can we oppose this, because that's their job, to be the opposition. And they said, right, well, we're not having this, we're going to, when we get in, we're going to reverse it. So apparently what this is going to cause, according to many of the papers, especially the financial pages, is you'll get people now say, right, mad scramble to work longer until there's a Labour government, which could be in 18 months' time, and so it's going to, and then there's going to be a mass exodus. Thanks, Labour.
Yeah.
How sensible is that?
Yeah, you do. I mean, I have to say, with this, one thing I hadn't realised is that 40,000 a year limit you can put into your pensions, which of course is way above what most people would do. But that has been frozen for 9 years now. So this, actually upping it to 60,000 isn't as big a jump as it may seem.
No, and if you're, and it's 40,000 stashed away if you're on a six-figure salary touching 200,000, you probably want to do that.
Yeah.
Should we have a look at The Guardian? And this is a new report into the Met Police over racist and sexist culture.
Yes, well, I have to tell you, I don't have a copy of The Guardian,
right.
but so I can't say that I've read this, but I'm assuming, it is the Metropolitan Police, and stories have been coming out, haven't they, over the last few months, particularly. There have been two officers, haven't there? One of them who killed Sarah Everard, and then it was found that he'd been reported for exposing himself in takeaways before that, and it was a big joke on WhatsApp with his mates. And then there was another Metropolitan Police officer as well. So this is now a formal. This isn't just reporting by the newspapers. This is now a formal report, which would appear backs up public concerns, says yes, it is actually institutionalised, and it's worrying. I do feel sorry for good, honest coppers who are just going about, because anybody now would be a bit wary, wouldn't they? of a police officer. Is he a good one? Is he a bad one?
Yeah, which is unfair.
And it's that unfair to people who are decent and trying to do their job.
I think there was a poll out last week, the most recent one. It was something like 4%. This is the Met Police we're talking about now, so it's in London. 4% only of women and girls would trust a police officer wholeheartedly. I mean, for those who are doing a good job, which, as you say, is over 95%, I mean, it must just be so upsetting for them to see that. And so Mark Rowley's saying 2 or 3 officers will be in court every week for the foreseeable.
Yeah, I mean,
it's dealt with.
The other thing that's quite disturbing is if the Metropolitan Police Force is not particularly out of kilter with the rest of the population. You know, if the recruitment policies aren't so bad that it's just full of wrong uns, then is it a representative of general society? Then, you know, is there that large an element of people in our midst who hold those views still quietly and share them with groups?
Maybe. Let's have a look at the Mail.
Yeah.
Oxfam has lost the plot. They've got an inclusivity guide that they've released, 92 pages, you know, and there's some stuff which will get people's goats, you know, about...
Are you allowed to say goats? Isn't that disparaging to a hoofed animal?
I wanted to look at some of the stuff that is slightly less obvious.
Yeah.
Right. And away from all the gender stuff, which you know, obviously was its own thing. You can't say black market. You've got to say informal economy, because informal economy avoids negative connotations and is a clear and accurate description.
That one jumps out at me.
But black market, it avoids negative connotations.
Yeah.
There are negative connotations to black market. It's a point of it.
Yeah, as a label for a tax avoiding under-the-counter, backhanded kind of a way to carry on. What they're saying is you can't refer to it as a black market because that makes it, you know, using the word black is wrong in that because it's suggesting black is bad. Oh, I'm not suggesting black is bad, are you? I'm not saying that. To me, they're actually making themselves a laughing stock because they're kind of saying black is inferior, black is bad, and we're not saying that.
No, when you get into with our money, when you get into the black, you're doing all right.
Yeah, and you can't say anymore BAME.
No.
Mixed race. I know coloured's been offensive for some time.
Well,
I don't see the difference between coloured and people of colour.
No.
I would never call somebody a person of colour.
No.
Because it just puts everybody into the same bag. So they're recommending that. I wouldn't.
We say that, they are recommending people of colour, person of colour, or indigenous and people of colour. But then they go on to say people of colour is critiqued as being problematic as it is othering to anyone who is not white.
Yeah.
And reinforces the idea of whiteness as standard. So they say they don't like people of colour, but we should use that. I mean, why don't you just say mixed race?
You can use, though, I thought this was a wrong word to use because how would you define it? So I've avoided it for years. Indigenous.
Oh, really?
So they're saying you should be using indigenous rather than...
That's okay, yeah.
Well, what's indigenous? So are you more indigenous than Ellie with her Irish heritage?
Definitely.
Am I more indigenous than Ellie, who my Irishness is a generation older? So am I more indigenous?
Where's the line?
And you can't use ethnic minority. You've got to say minority ethnic person.
Some really silly ones like headquarters.
Yeah.
They don't want you to use headquarters anymore. Instead, you've got to name the specific office location because it implies a power dynamic to prioritise one office over the other.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I'm in GBNEWS headquarters. How about this one? You can't say biological male or female now. You've got to say assigned female, male at birth.
Assigned at birth.
Yeah.
Which they helpfully do AFAB and AMAB.
Right.
As assigned female or male at birth.
And you can't have not to use LGBT or any of the longer ones anymore.
No, you can use it, but, well, You see, this I find very confusing. You can't say LGBT or LGBTQIX.
Yeah.
I don't know what X is. You can't say gay or lesbian. You should instead use LGBTQIA+. Now, come on. Come on. I mean, that's like... They also say it's important to note that some people consider the plus to indicate others not explicitly covered in this acronym to be insufficient, but they include it anyway.
Elderly's out, right? You can't say somebody's elderly anymore. You can say they're an elderly person, though.
Well,
and you can't say somebody's deaf. You can say people with hearing impairment. Well, I know that because it used to be on Great Poland Street. Used to walk past it going down to the BBC. It used to be the Royal Institute for the Deaf, and they changed that 20 years ago. So,
what's wrong with being deaf?
And you can't be poor either.
Oh.
You can't say poor people. You've got to say people experiencing poverty.
Yeah, or
And you
living
can't
within
say,
poverty.
and get this one, you can't say mission because it infers colonialism, a trip to lower income countries, whereas a trip to New York, for example, you can't use field visit because that insinuates you go into an inferior country.
Oh, Tom Cruise is going to be furious.
Yeah,
What's he going to do for Mission Impossible?
Yeah, but so mission, you can't use that because it's like, you know, in the old days when we used to send priests to Africa. But people go on, look at all those missions, trade missions that Liz Truss went on.
Yeah.
Rishi Sunak's just been to America to discuss this deal with the Americans building submarines for Australia. Is that not a trade mission anymore?
So. I mean, look, I can see what they're trying to do, and I'm sure it's done with the best intentions. That's me being generous, but it's crackers, sadly. You know, it's just a step too far. They overstep the boundaries.
Yeah.
Can we have a look at the BBC? This is in the Telegraph this morning. The licence fee, they're going to put it up.
Yeah, it's not been increased for years, so there's now a proposal for a rise of £13.
So if we all pay £13, will that cover
Gary Lineker.
Gary Lineker's new contract?
I fervently believe in the BBC. I think it's special. I think it's quite unique in the world. I'm not such a fan of the present incumbents in management. And over the years, since 1987, I encountered about 8 director generals, and some of them were brilliant, and some of them are distinctly lacking. I mean, the shambles recently, in the last week or two, over the Gary Lineker thing, it all boils down to the fact that nobody in charge knew what was in Gary Lineker's contract. And Gary Lineker was always confident that he was, you know, on solid ground and he hadn't done anything wrong, presumably because he and his agents knew what was in that contract. And speaking from personal experience, years ago, I said that there were 2 clauses in the presenter's contract which really stuck in my throat. One was you must not bring the BBC into disrepute. I didn't have really a problem with that, except it was so vague. I felt they could interpret it however they wanted. And another one was that if you wanted to take part in any extreme physical activities, you had to get permission first. So I went to a meeting and asked what that meant, and they said, "Oh well, we can't. If you're contracted to present for us, we can't have you putting yourself in jeopardy, you know, by like abseiling down a cliff or something." So I assured them I had no intention of doing anything like that, but they wouldn't take it out. So I said, "So I'm just about to go to Mallorca, Bob." And he's retired now. And so I'm standing on the beach and I see one of those big inflatable bananas bouncing past, being towed by a speedboat. Can I go on it, or do I have to ring you and say, "Hey, Bob, take it out." The most important one was, you are not allowed to express an opinion in public. And I said, "I'm not signing that. That has to come out." I said, "Everybody in this country, last time I checked, had the right to freedom of speech. That's what makes us a great democracy in the world." I said I would never have expressed a political opinion. Well, in the 10 years that I'm 5 Live or local radio, I was presenting news programmes because I'm there to interview people and as a conduit, as you are, and people don't want to know my views, and they should not know what my opinion is, because that could influence how they think I'm framing questions when so I said, but now I'm like messing about playing a few records every Saturday, which I did for 20 years. There's no way you're going to gag me. I'm not going to say vote Labour or vote Tory, but if I want to express an opinion on something that's going on in my country, that's my right to do so, away from this building.
Yeah.
Not on air, so I'm not signing it, so it was taken out. Now they're saying this week, oh well, you know, we've been through the contract with Gary and we're all on the same page now. That's what's happened. It's been a total cock-up. He was never. They're now saying, oh, Gary's got permission to express opinions. I don't agree with Gary Lineker, but I think I admire him for standing up for people and saying, we are not going to be bullied and gagged by BBC managers. You know, every time, even after I'd had that taken out of my contract, if I commented on anything that was vaguely controversial, which most big issues of the day are, I'd get a really sinister phone call from management, and so I think it's unfair. Anyway, the long answer is, I think the BBC is worth what will be about £162 a year. When you divide, it's like 12 quid a month, 15 quid a month.
Well, let us know if you agree with Liz on that one. GBViews@gbnews.uk. We'll catch up with you in the next hour, Liz.
Okay.
Thank you very much indeed.